The rain had finally stopped its soft, punishing applause. Street lamps threw long, tired halos across the alley where Isabella Vaughn now crouched, wrapped in a threadbare coat that did little against the damp. Her breath came in shallow, stubborn puffs, each one a small rebellion against the night that had stripped her of everything. Welcome to Celebrity Cookies, where the tea is always hot and the stories come with sprinkles of surprise. Make sure to subscribe, leave a comment with your take on the story. She could still hear them, the clinking of crystal, the muffled laughter from rooms that had once been hers, and the echo of words so sharp they might as well have been knives. The city felt enormous and indifferent, a cathedral of concrete where gods and pretenders alike worshipped at the altar of fortune. Isabella had once stood at the pulpit. Tonight, she knelt in the gutter. "Do you hear that, Isabel?" The voice came like a memory, slick, entitled, practiced. It belonged to the woman who had taken everything, a breath of perfume and disdain. In Isabella's mind it bloomed into a fuller picture, the mansion reduced to a name in a press release, the boardroom applause that had once affirmed her rule now a chorus of strangers. She listened. The city replied with the distant wail of a siren, the rattle of a truck, the soft, constant drip from a leaking pipe. The world kept living. It refused to stop and render judgment. Isabella folded herself tighter, palms pressed against her knees. Her hands still remembered the texture of silk and the cold weight of a diamond that had once rested against her throat. She could taste metal, memory and salt, where tears met rain. She thought about the baby who had been taken from her, the illegal swap that had been a deliberate, venomous theft. The thought made her stomach turn in a way that had nothing to do with hunger. It was grief, sharpened by rage and the humiliation of betrayal. They had thought they made her small. They had thought stripping her of titles and jewels would unmake her. But grief, she had learned, does not fold neatly into the hands of those who try to bribe it away. It curdles, it settles, it becomes something else, something that burns, that plans. "Do you hear that, Isabel?" The voice again, this time a whisper of triumph. Ava's laugh piped through the memory, the way she tossed a dish towel like a flag when she walked into a room she hadn't earned. Isabella pictured her now, perfect posture, somewhere dry and warm, another man's arm across her waist, the same hands that had accepted favors and called them fate. She pictured Michael, her son and the blade in her back, his face a mask of disgust as he turned to claim a mother he had found in blood, not in years of being raised and loved. Isabella's fingers found the small, battered pendant beneath her coat. Nothing like the Aurelian star, of course. It was some trinket from a life before the boardroom, a thing she kept for reasons she wouldn't have admitted even to herself. She closed her fist around it and let the small object ground her. "You gave up everything," she murmured into the cold, not to anyone in particular. "You signed. You gave them the keys." Her voice, though quiet, carried a steel that surprised even her. The world had not finished with Isabella Vaughn. That defiant little sound, 2 syllables, made of stubborn vowels, stretched and became a vow. She would not disappear simply because someone else had declared her obsolete. Rain or no rain, she would move. She would hunt. She would take the thin, painful steps back toward the light. The plan wasn't pretty. It would not be neat. It would be a slow excavation of truths others assumed were buried forever. But unchecked assumptions had always been her enemy and her opportunity. The first step, she thought, was to remember the voice that had suggested legal help in the crowd, the crocodile who'd offered to represent her with a smile and a press conference on the side. Useful predators were rare, and sometimes allies came wrapped in the appetites of those who wanted payment in spectacle. She would need that kind of thing now. Messy, public, and loud. "Do you hear that, Isabel?" the world seemed to ask, again and again. And each repetition chipped at the brittle surfaces of shame until something like clarity emerged. Her hands loosened around the pendant, and she let it fall back against her chest. It was only then that she realized her knees had stopped shaking. The city, for all its cruelties, had also taught her that survival had a cadence, small daily choices stacked into a life. The first of those choices would be visibility. If they thought silence would be her extinction, she would make a different kind of noise. Isabella reached into her coat pocket and fished out a crumpled photograph, faded, edges scalloped by time. It was a picture taken years ago, a younger Isabella, not yet architect of a corporate empire, laughing with a woman now lost to the exigencies of the boardroom. In that softer face, something warmer than strategy lived. She pressed the photo to her lips, a benediction, a curse, an oath. They had taken her son. They had taken her wealth. They had staged the most genteel of exiles, one sealed with signatures and press statements and the inexorable law of public opinion. But there were things other than title and treasure, like truth, like the record of a birth, like the small, stubborn details that bureaucrats seldom accounted for when they forged new narratives. She would start with people who mattered less to the story. Cleaners, nurses, the soft-eyed midwife who had delivered the baby and whose conscience might be small but not entirely bought. They had overlooked such people when inventing their perfect lie. They had banking tables and shared confidences with PR firms, but they had thought the human debris of life was inconsequential. That was the opening Isabella needed. She would walk back through her life and unravel it stitch by stitch, reclaiming fragments. She would reopen the wound and let it bleed truth until the stain could no longer be faked. In the end, the lie would not survive being told in the light. Her pulse kicked up, not from fear this time, but from the emergent electricity of plan. The night sharpened, the alleys glinting. A bus coughed past, carrying people who had never known her face beyond a headline. As it swept away, Isabella let the picture of Michael fade into a different kind of focus, not as the son who had stabbed her, but as a link to the child stolen and the debt that needed settling. Up ahead, the alley opened into a larger avenue. Neon and tired billboards threw garish light. A newsstand rattled with the latest screaming headlines. Vaughn renounces power. Scandal rocks Vaughn Group. All of them designed to be eaten and forgotten by tomorrow's eyes. Isabella pulled her coat tighter and moved toward them. She felt the city's heartbeat sink to her own. Each step measured, deliberate. She would not be a cowering figure in the press anymore. She would be a problem they hadn't expected to reappear. They had treated her like a story that had ended. She would make sure they understood stories could be rewritten. The pavement sparkled where the rain had kissed it. Isabella paused, looking up at the sky, then down at the photograph in her hand. Her voice, when it came, was not a plea. It was a promise to the empty air and to any ears that might still hold memory of her name. "They think I'm done," she said, letting the words curl into the night. "They think the last page has been written. But the last page is mine to write." A soft hum from a nearby phone vibrated, a notification from someone who had once been on her contact list. She ignored it. It would come to her, and she would decide when to answer. For now, the city offered paths, small and crooked and full of witnesses. She would take them. Down on the corner, a man sold roasted chestnuts, steam fogging his breath in the air. He wrapped them in paper and kept counting the small coins in his palm. He didn't know her. He would not recognize the woman who had once signed million-dollar checks. But he saw hunger, and he offered a small nod to a stranger who asked for change. Isabella accepted the nod like a benediction. She would start small. One midwife, one discarded receipt, one nurse who had not been paid enough to forget. She would rebuild her case from the ground up. And when the edifice of lies finally cracked, a different kind of music would flood the halls of the Vaughn Group, one that hummed with accountability instead of champagne. She put the photograph back into her pocket and rose, standing taller than the pavement demanded. The city did not belong to the Vaughns or the Weaseltons or anyone who thought their names would make them eternal. It belonged to stories, lived, stolen, reclaimed. Isabella straightened her coat, adjusted the collar like armor, and began to walk. Her voice trailed off into the night as she turned the corner, but one thought remained. A quiet engine beneath the thunder of humiliation. "They think I'll disappear. Watch me." The lamps watched her go, indifferent witnesses to a woman who refused to be erased. And somewhere that mattered, the baby whose life had been stolen had not yet lost its story. Isabella would find it. She did not know how. She only knew she would not stop until the truth had been told, and the city, which had once cheered her, would be forced to listen. She walked until the neon blurred and the city's roar narrowed to a hum, like the background track beneath a memory. The first steps were awkward, the way any reclamation is, small, uncertain, cataloged in the muscles and nerves before it arrives in the mind. But with each block she put between herself and the alley, Isabella felt some of the rawness dull into determination. There was work to do, and work, she had learned, required patience more than fury. She kept moving through neighborhoods that had no place for the Vaughn crest, apartment buildings with laundry strung like banners, corner stores where proprietors knew every face that passed through. She listened now for the ordinary human sounds she had ignored when power and prestige insulated her from them. The rattle of a neighbor arguing on a balcony, a child's laugh ricocheting off brick, the odd, comforting bark of a dog claiming its territory. Those sounds anchored her better than any boardroom ever had. Isabella remembered, vividly and painfully, the way the courtroom drama had begun to feel like a script written by others. The press with its relish for spectacle, the lawyers with their prepared lines, the whispers that shaped public opinion like wind shapes sand. She could have hired a PR firm. She could have chosen fury and glossy, expensive packages. Instead, she cupped the small, human threads, those nurses, the midwife's shift, the name of the hospital porter who kept odd hours. Power, she knew now, had a soft underbelly, the people for whom the night was long and the pay was thin. They mattered. Their small testimonies would become the mortar in her architecture of truth. She found a payphone, an anachronism, but it worked, and used a few crumpled bills to make a call she'd rehearsed in the dark. It was a number she'd kept in a folder marked private on an old phone, a midwife who had left the hospital 2 years ago under murky circumstances. Isabella had not seen her since the boardroom dinners and gala nights. Now, her voice on the other end trembled with surprise, and then a careful sympathy. "Mrs. Vaughn," the woman whispered, recognition softening into worry. "Call me Isabella," she said, because the woman had once called her that in a delivery room where the world had still seemed simple enough to call people by their names. "I need your help." There was a pause long enough to hear a chair scrape, the rustle of a paper, then a solid, human yes. They arranged to meet at a diner before dawn, the kind of place where coffee never turns cold and the cooks didn't ask too many questions. Isabella arrived before the sun, the city still yawning. The diner's neon sign buzzed like an old companion. She slid into a booth and watched the door until it opened and the midwife slipped inside, hands rough with honest labor. "You shouldn't be here," the midwife said, sitting without pretense. "They told me to stay away from any Vaughn matter." "People tell a lot of things," Isabella replied. Her voice was quieter than she would have once imagined, smaller but steadier. "You were there for my delivery." The midwife's face folded, and for a breath Isabella wondered if she'd made a mistake in calling this particular woman, if the years of bribery and bargaining had taken their toll. Then the midwife reached into her coat and produced a small stack of brittle paper, records, notes, a receipt with a hospital stamp. "Back then," she said gently, "I kept a copy. Figured it was best insurance. I didn't think," her voice broke, "I didn't think anyone would need it." Isabella took the papers like holy things. Her fingers trembled as she unfolded the first page. Birth times, ink signatures, a nurse's name she half remembered, the kind of detail that could open a door and let truth walk through it. The midwife watched her with a compassion that required no grand speeches. "You don't know how grateful I am," Isabella said. "Don't thank me," the midwife replied. "Fix what you can. And be careful. They're dangerous when cornered." Dangerous had once meant lawsuits and threats of scandal. Now it meant people who had learned to gild their cruelty with the language of charity and reputation. It meant men who could make a woman homeless with a single signature and call it business. And it meant women who could be crueler in the service of ambition than any man. Isabella left the diner with the papers folded into her coat like a map toward a country she had lost. Her steps were fewer now, more deliberate. There was a path forward she could see in pieces. The midwife's testimony, a forgotten nurse, a hospital porter who'd like to whistle and whose whistle might have carried a story. It wasn't a clean plan, and she liked it that way. Clean plans belonged to men who thought the world would follow ledger lines. She would go crooked. She would dig into the mess and find the truth where it had been shoved away. Words slipped out, the way a small stone can make ripples across a quiet pond. A freelance journalist, nosy by nature and hungry for a story that would put her byline back on the front page, started asking questions at the hospital. He found a nurse who hadn't been paid for overtime in months and whose resentment was a more honest currency than a cushioned silence. He found a porter who liked to smoke behind the surgical wing and had a soft spot for gossip. "You're playing with fire," the porter told the journalist in a voice that rumbled like a storm under a smile. "But maybe it's time someone turned on the light." When the first piece hit the local paper, it was quiet, a column tucked between an obit and an advertisement. But inside it was a single line, a breadcrumb, anomalies in personnel logs during a high-profile delivery. The name Vaughn was wrestled into it like a shark in shallow water, and the city's appetite stirred. Isabella watched the column curled on the kitchen table of the cheap flat she had rented, far from the marble foyer she'd abandoned. The TV in the corner muttered and glowed, and then, like a slow, inevitable tide, picked up the scent. Social feeds, which had once buoyed her press releases, turned with equal speed. Messages came conservative and then fierce. Some were venom, some were pity. A few rarer were offers of help. The world loved a scandal, but it loved to come back more. Her legal team, a peculiar mix formed from the midwife's discreet suggestion and a lawyer who had once benefited from a hidden debt, acted with the practical urgency of those who understood that the law was as much about performance as it was about justice. They submitted motions and collected affidavits, persuaded hesitant witnesses to provide statements, and offered protection to those who feared being exposed. The conflict evolved into a clamor that could not be ignored. As the battle became more public, the fragile facade of her adversaries began to crack. Ava, who had previously relied on her social charm, found herself recoiling under the scrutiny that Isabella directed at her. Michael, whose arrogance had once shielded him, realized that public sentiment was not as easily swayed as discussions in a private boardroom. Their supporters, motivated more by convenience than by true belief, revealed their loyalties to be weak unless strengthened by the heavier bonds of truth and fear. "You think I'll vanish? Just watch me," Isabella had declared into the night. Now the scrutiny began, and the observers returned, not with the malicious delight of those who had once humiliated her, but with the blunt force of exposure. When the midwife testified, her clarity silenced the room. The nurse, who had worried for her job, recounted strange interactions, including a subtle request to ensure everything goes smoothly, a phrase that took on legal significance. The porter recalled a discarded blanket found near a dumpster, a detail that could not easily be dismissed as mere legal jargon. Each revelation became a fissure. The Aurelian star, once a symbol of vanity and exclusivity, lost its divine luster. It transformed into evidence of a human tragedy. What had been a coveted object became a line item, subject to legal scrutiny and subpoenas. In quiet moments, Isabella found herself thinking of her child, whose small life had been sacrificed for greed. She allowed those thoughts to remain pure and intense. Regardless of the legal outcome or any reparations awarded, it was the recovery of that child, of that stolen life, that would complete the reconstruction. Lawsuits and media coverage could redistribute wealth. They could not replace a stolen first cry or an unheard lullaby. That was why she sought not just revenge, but reunion. At night, when the city quieted and the neon lights softened, Isabella would sit by her window and envision the path she would take if they discovered the child's whereabouts. In those delicate hours, she imagined she could already hear the gentle movements of a small life, a breath against a tiny cheek, the quiet trust of a little hand. She allowed herself to feel hope in small doses, something she had never permitted herself before. The situation intensified, capturing global attention. Late-night talk shows, which had previously ridiculed corporate scandals as mere entertainment, now engaged in serious discussions about the ethical implications of wealth and motherhood. Commentators debated intentions and responsibility, but amidst the punditry and radio discussions, a poignant human narrative emerged. A mother separated from her child due to a scheme that was both criminal and unsettling. Isabella was portrayed in various ways. Some depicted her as a tragic figure, while others viewed her as a representation of arrogance. She accepted these portrayals, understanding that public narratives were tools to be wielded, and she planned to use them strategically to shift the focus from sympathy to the flaws in the system that had wronged her. This was a performance she had once mastered at social events, but now she was learning the steps from those who navigated life on the fringes. Then, one afternoon, She received an unexpected phone call from a social worker whose weary voice conveyed the burden of witnessing too many disrupted lives. Though her words were few, they were clear. "We have a lead," she announced. Isabella felt as if the world had shifted beneath her, like a ship catching a favorable breeze. Her legs weakened, and she had to sit down at the kitchen table. For a moment, the weight of hope left her breathless. But then she took a deep breath and composed herself. This was not the conclusion, it was a new beginning. It would require all her patience, a shedding of pretenses, and unanticipated negotiations now that the world had shifted its support. She stood up and approached the window, gazing out at the city that had witnessed her downfall and was now observing her resurgence. The skyline sparkled under indifferent stars. She pressed her forehead against the cool glass and whispered, not to the city or the law, but to the small life somewhere in the world who had yet to know her name. "Hold on," she urged. "I'm coming." Outside, life went on. A couple quarreling in a passing car, a child kicking a ball against a stoop, a dog barking at an unseen moon. Inside, a woman who had lost everything tightened her coat around the bulge in her pocket, filled with the midwife's records, and prepared to step into the next chapter of a story that the city believed was over. She was far from finished, not by a long shot. The phone call arrived like a small detonator, quiet, precise, and capable of shaking a whole crumbling structure. Isabella waited as the social worker delivered the information in careful, professional tones. A clinic located 3 boroughs away, an intake form marked for an adoption case, a baby with no known relatives, and a middle name that matched a note on one of the midwife's lips. The lead was as fragile as ice on a puddle, ready to melt or shatter at any moment. But it existed. "I can get you access," the social worker said. "But you'll need legal documents, and you'll have to—" "Just tell me where," Isabella interrupted, knowing that sometimes brevity is necessary to prevent panic from spreading like spilled sugar. "Tell me now." There was a brief silence, as if someone were searching through a file. Then came the address, a cramped shelter that handled overflow cases, a satellite clinic that accepted walk-ins when the main hospitals were full. Isabella jotted it down on the back of the midwife's receipt, her handwriting shaky with a hope she hadn't allowed herself to feel for months. The drive across town felt long, as every red light seemed personal, like a reprimand. Isabella watched the city pass by, the same city that had celebrated her a year ago, now feeling like a stranger. She rehearsed what she would say to the social worker, to any official who stood between her and the truth. Identity, evidence, proof of birth. Her documents felt flimsy compared to the weight of what she was trying to reclaim. But she had the midwife's records, the porter's recollection, and a legal team that had been working to recover what had been lost. At the shelter, fluorescent lights buzzed like distant insects. There were children with weary eyes and mothers smoking to steady their hands. Isabella's appearance, clean coat, old dignity tucked into a cheaper purse, caught a few curious glances before being absorbed by the urgency of the place. The social worker led her into a small office where papers were stacked like tiny buildings against the walls. An intake nurse was at a computer, her brow furrowed in concentration. "We've added you to the list," the social worker said, gesturing to a thin folder. "We've been trying to locate witnesses, and this is our best lead. The clinic's report is vague. Someone brought in an infant and claimed they found it. No name, no ID. We flagged it because of the timing." Isabella's throat tightened. Timing. The very thing that could connect to a memory of a delivery room, a flurry of nurses, a mother who hadn't left the ward. "Can I see the report?" she asked, her voice low and steady, betraying none of the anxiety she felt. The nurse typed, clicked, and printed. A stack of papers was handed over, the kind of bureaucratic document that had once been a tool in Isabella's hands. Now it felt like a shaky ladder to climb. The clinic log contained a note indicating that an unclaimed infant was found 2 days after Isabella's delivery. Someone had scrawled in messy handwriting, "Possible exposure. Baby left near dumpster, wet." The thought of a tiny body abandoned in the rain hit her hard, a painful image she had been trying to avoid. "This can't be right," she said. "Who brought the baby in?" They searched through other intake notes until they found a name, a temporary worker who had checked in the newborn before vanishing from the schedule. The social worker smiled professionally. "We've located the temp. She's in custody for unrelated charges but provided a statement. She claimed that 2 individuals approached her in a parking lot and offered money to get rid of a thing. She panicked and took the baby to the clinic. Isabella felt a mix of emotions as her mind raced with the implications of 2 people, money, the same kind that had silenced others in rooms filled with perfume and power. Words like swapped, dumped, and stolen flashed through her thoughts. She felt both justified and empty. Evidence could still sting like salt. "You need to meet her," the social worker suggested. "We can set up an interview, but you must be cautious. She's frightened. People have told her what to say." Isabella nodded. The word careful had been part of her memos and speeches, but now it felt heavy and metallic. Time was short, and she had little room for mistakes. "Do it," she instructed. "Set it up now." They drove to the facility where the temp worker was being held for questioning. The harsh fluorescent lights seemed to amplify the sense of humiliation that bureaucracy imposed. The woman behind the glass was smaller than Isabella had envisioned, her shoulders hunched as if burdened by an invisible weight. Her eyes flitted around nervously. "You're Isabella Vaughn?" she asked after a tense moment of recognition, possibly triggered by the money or the name. "Yes," Isabella replied simply, pulling the midwife's documents from her purse and placing them on the glass, proof and memory laid out together. The woman's gaze moved over the name, the signatures, and the birth time that matched the midwife's records. "They told me to take it," the temp murmured. "They said they'd pay me. They said don't look, don't touch, just put it in the car." She swallowed hard. "I panicked. I brought it to the clinic." "I didn't." "You did the right thing by bringing the baby to the clinic," Isabella reassured her, feeling it was important to acknowledge that small act of mercy. "Who are they? What did they look like?" The woman described them in a way typical of someone who is scared. Sharp, fragmented details. A woman wearing perfume, a man who walked with a limp, a smirk that revealed too many teeth. It was vague, but it was sufficient. She mentioned that money changed hands, both cash and a small velvet box. This detail made the image of the Aurelian star flicker in Isabella's mind like a moth drawn to a porch light. A legal process began to unfold. The temporary worker's statement allowed the police to pursue subpoenas, trace payments, and review surveillance footage, small, mechanical actions that could collectively break the imposed silence. Isabella complied with each step, her anger now managed by the legal process rather than explosive outbursts. She discovered a peculiar sense of calm, the kind that comes when desperation is transformed into actionable tasks. Then, like a bolt in a clear sky, the clinic called back. The baby was alive, healthy, and awake when tested. A small, miraculous detail, but every miracle in Isabella's new world felt gilded by danger. There were logistics to settle, DNA swabs, custody hearings, a morgue staffer's relief at paperwork that would allow a baby to be placed in a caretaker's arms rather than in a filing drawer. Human tenderness surfaced in the strangest places. Nurses who had once served champagne and canapes to the wealthy now offered hand-me-down cradles with the same soft hands. When the first DNA test confirmed what Isabella's heart had whispered all along, a match, something in the room loosened like a clenched fist releasing its last coin. The legal team moved swiftly. Judge's orders, temporary custody, hospital protocols. All the gears of a system that could work when prodded properly started to turn. Isabella sat in a sterile waiting room, surrounded by beige chairs and the quiet hum of an institution doing its job, and felt the world tilt back toward a north she recognized. But the reprieve was uneasy. This victory, which tasted of milk and diapers rather than champagne and contracts, was immediate and fragile. There were countersuits and PR machines firing up on the other side. Ava and Michael's camp denied everything, denials dressed in the language of wounded entitlement. They painted Isabella as desperate, as grasping for media attention. It was the old playbook, character assassination before accountability. Isabella expected the smear. She expected the threats and the late-night emails promising settlement offers and quiet exits. But she was not the same woman who had signed away her assets in one fatal gesture. She had been forged, molten and tempered, into something that could survive accusation and return the favor with documentary proof. The moment came when a nurse wheeled the bassinet into a small room, its door closing like the hinge of fate. Isabella's hands shook as she reached through the bars to touch a tiny fist, an infant's skin like heated porcelain. He smelled of milk and something small and fierce that made everything else fall away. The office, the press, the corporation, gone, evaporated by the simple biology of a person she had carried and loved. "Michael," she whispered, because the name belonged to both memory and theft. It felt strange and wrong to use his name here. The child was both proof and person. The baby's eyelids fluttered and opened like a slow sunrise, dark irises blinking at a face he had not learned but somehow recognized. Isabella laughed then, soft, breaking, the sound of a lock turning after years of rust. "This is my son," she said to no one in particular, and to everyone who had watched her fall, and to those who had helped her claw back. "My son." Outside the hospital, the world churned, hungry for the next headline. Inside, a mother and a child found one another again in a room that smelled of antiseptic and the small assurance of human presence. Isabella felt every emotion at once: vindication, grief for the hours stolen, fury at the cruelty that had made this necessary, and a fierce, blazing gratitude for the chance to reclaim what had been taken. The fight was not over. It never would be. Not until the legal machinery fully dismantled the lies, and until the people who had trafficked in cruelty answered for their choices. But in that single, incandescent present, with a tiny fist wrapped around her finger, Isabella allowed herself to rest in the impossible warmth of reunion. She had wanted champagne and power. She found, instead, battered hands and a sleeping child in a city that had to look up from its tabloids and witness a woman who refused to be erased. The story that would run on the front pages the next morning would not be entirely clean. It would be messy and human, and maybe that was the point. Isabella pressed her forehead to the baby's and closed her eyes. "I promised," she breathed. "I promised I'd come." The room hummed with machines and distant voices, but for a sliver of time, the world narrowed to two breathing bodies and the fragile, irreducible fact of a life returned. The reunion gave Isabella something that power had never managed to buy her: clarity. For the first time in months, her steps weren't driven by survival but by choice. Yet choice came with a weight. The fragile warmth of her son's breath on her collarbone was matched by the cold certainty that Ava and Michael would not yield. Their empire was built on control, and the loss of a child, no, the exposure of what they had done to a child, was a threat to the foundation itself. Within a week, the retaliation began. Anonymous leaks slid into tabloids, photographs of Isabella at midnight diners, whispers about mental instability, accusations that she had fabricated records. Old acquaintances were coaxed into on-record comments, carefully edited to suggest she had always been erratic, prone to emotional exaggeration. It was Ava's style, polish and poison in the same sentence. Isabella, however, was no longer playing defense. Her legal team moved quickly, filing a civil suit alongside the criminal investigation. They demanded disclosure of financial records tied to shell accounts, the same ones the temp worker had described. Subpoenas landed like hammer strikes, and one by one, cracks began to spider through the Vaughn facade. An accountant came forward under the promise of immunity. A junior lawyer leaked emails in exchange for anonymity. Each testimony was a bead, and Isabella threaded them into a chain strong enough to choke an empire. But truth alone wasn't enough. Public opinion was its own court, and in that arena, Isabella had to be deliberate. She agreed to her first interview since the scandal broke, a long sit-down with the same journalist who had first sniffed out anomalies in the hospital records. The cameras caught her not in designer gowns but in the plain gray cardigan she wore every day now, her son's toy tucked in the pocket. She didn't speak with fury. She spoke with exhaustion, and with an honesty that unsettled even her own team. "They didn't just steal from me," she said softly, looking directly into the lens. "They stole from a child who deserved safety, from nurses who deserved integrity, from a city that believes power means responsibility. What happened to me isn't just scandal. It's a crime." The clip went viral. Suddenly, the Vaughn dynasty's name carried a different resonance. No longer philanthropists, but predators. Protesters gathered outside their corporate headquarters with signs. Hashtags lit up feeds, some mocking, some searing. Ava and Michael appeared in court with their lawyers, their eyes hidden behind sunglasses, the smugness replaced by an unfamiliar stiffness. And yet in private, Isabella knew that exposure only made them more dangerous. Their influence stretched further than cameras could see. A threatening note slipped under her flat's door reminded her that money could still buy shadows, and shadows could still hurt. One evening, as she rocked her son to sleep in the dim light of a borrowed lamp, her lawyer called with news. "The judge has agreed to fast-track custody," he said. "But there's a caveat. They'll try to appeal. They'll drag you through every loophole they can find. You need to be ready for months, maybe years of fighting." Isabella traced her son's tiny knuckles with her thumb, her jaw tightening. "Then we fight," she said. But she wasn't naive. She understood that this wasn't just about reclaiming her child anymore. It was about dismantling a machine that had stolen not only from her but from countless others who didn't have her voice, her stubbornness, her scraps of privilege left to wield. For the first time, she considered a thought that had once terrified her. What if her fall had been necessary? Not to break her, but to free her from the illusions she had wrapped around herself. The city would watch the trial like a spectacle. Ava and Michael would bare their teeth until the last verdict was inked. The world would be fed narratives of betrayal, greed, redemption. But Isabella knew the truth was simpler, quieter. A mother had found her child, and she would not let go again. And so, as autumn bled into winter, Isabella began preparing. Not just for court, not just for the cameras, but for war. The trial stretched for weeks, every day a battlefield of words and evidence. Ava's lies unraveled under cross-examination, her polished poise cracking with every contradiction. Michael, once so arrogant, squirmed when faced with proof of falsified records, his bravado reduced to stammering denials. And Nathan, the man Isabella had once trusted as her husband, sat stone-faced, realizing too late that the empire he tried to steal was collapsing into ash. But Isabella didn't gloat. She didn't need to. The truth did it for her. When the judge delivered the verdict, the courtroom fell into a silence so heavy it seemed to crush the air itself. Ava Sinclair and Nathan Vaughn are hereby found guilty of fraud, conspiracy, and child endangerment. Michael Vaughn is ordered to relinquish all claims to Vaughn Group, effective immediately. Custody of the child will remain solely with Isabella Vaughn. The words echoed like a church bell. For Isabella, it wasn't victory in the way she had once imagined. No crown, no triumphant parade. It was simpler, deeper. She had her son. She had her freedom. Outside the courthouse, cameras flashed, microphones pressed toward her. Reporters shouted, "Miss Vaughn, do you have a comment? How does it feel to lose everything and yet win everything?" She paused, her son's small hand gripping hers. For a long moment, she said nothing, her gaze lifting past the crowd, past the noise, toward the winter sky. Finally, she spoke, her voice steady, almost gentle. "They thought they were breaking me," she said. "But they only freed me. Wealth, power, titles, they come and go. What matters is truth. What matters is love. And that can never be stolen." The crowd erupted, not in pity this time, but in something closer to reverence. Weeks later, Isabella didn't return to the Vaughn mansion or the corporate boardrooms. She built something smaller, humbler, a foundation for abandoned children, named after the daughter she had lost but never forgotten. She poured her energy into it not as a businesswoman, but as a mother who knew the cost of betrayal and the power of survival. And in the quiet evenings, when her son laughed in their modest home, when his footsteps echoed against walls unadorned by riches, Isabella felt something that no empire had ever given her. Peace. The Vaughn dynasty ended in scandal, their names dragged through the mud of history. But Isabella, she walked forward, not as a queen of industry, not as a victim of betrayal, but as something far stronger. A woman reborn. She stood at the threshold of the restaurant like a weathered queen at the gates of a new kingdom, one she had never asked to enter but which fate, in its perverse sense of irony, had shoved open for her. The maitre d' cleared his throat, a tiny orchestra of social nerves preparing for the overture. Crystal chandeliers spilled a liquid light across white tablecloths and tailored suits. The air was thick with perfume and the small, brittle tension of people pleased with themselves. Inside, the banquet was a living thing, proud and predatory, each guest an ornamental tooth on the jaws of an industry that fed on reputation. Laughter bounced off marble and velvet like coins. The Weaseltons stood at the edge of that ocean, bobbing, smug and buoyant. The crowd had been primed for spectacle, and they had arrived ready to perform. "They know that girl wasn't really Vivian Hartley," someone had said before she'd even entered. The accusation hung in the air, more lethal than any knife. In posh rooms, that conversation is a currency. A rumor launched, then cashed in at the expense of another's dignity. Isabella paused only a heartbeat. She felt, then, the strange vertigo of two lives stacked on top of one another, the memory of a mansion where she had once ordered the night to start on cue, and the cold, raw hunger of those years on the streets where she had learned to move like a ghost through people's blind spots. She was not washed in silk tonight. She was washed in truth and a kind of fierce, thin hope. Inside the room, the insults were a cascade. They fell faster than any security guard could collect them. "You're just a boring, ugly housewife. A homeless stray with nothing." The words smacked and spat at her, but they ricocheted off the people who threw them and landed on the attentive ears of a crowd that had come to watch someone be made small. She let them talk. Let the river speak its cruelest runs. She had already learned the grammar of humiliation. She knew the parts of speech that broke the fastest. But she also knew, now with the thing clutched under her heart, the rhythm of a small life beneath her ribs, that kind of noise would not hold forever. "Miss Vaughn, this is your first public appearance in bankruptcy. Is there anything you would like to say?" the interviewer taunted, mic thrust like a small spear. Isabella opened her mouth, and the words she'd been rehearsing in cheap motel rooms and the corners of diners rose up like a prayer. "They stole from me," she could have said. "They stole a child." But she chose another route, softer, more devastating for its humanity. She chose to let the empty spaces in their argument be noticed. She chose the truth as it fit the moment. "I was robbed," she said quietly to the people who wanted spectacle. "Not only of things, but of time. Of a child's first steps and first words. And I will not allow that theft to stand." But the Weaseltons would not be held in place by moral clarity. They lunged, claws out, desperate to salvage an image built on the illusion of invulnerability. "She's a fake liar," they spat. Ava's voice shone with practiced cruelty. Nathan's face was a study in the slow unmooring of entitlement. "Don't listen to her," they instructed the room like wardens to a flock. And then, because where there is a crowd, there is always someone with a camera and a hunger for impact. A person live-streamed what had become the nucleus of that night's blood sport. Security footage from the hospital, a grainy, devastating sequence that refused to be spun into innocuousness. The clip showed a small, desperate exchange. Two figures, furtive and practical, exchanging cash and the baby as if it were a commodity to be moved. The thing that had been shoved under a blanket and left by the trash can was now a sequence replayed across 100 phones and 50 television networks. The sound in the room changed. Mockery curdled into a low, incredulous murmur. "Nathan Weaselton killed his daughter and replaced her with his mistress's baby," a commentator posted. The words like a match dropped into dry tinder. "For money!" The feed exploded. Hashtags flamed. Equities shuffled as partners pulled investments like a reflexive chain reaction. Wealth is fragile when shame comes knocking. 100 phone alerts chimed like little hammers. "You murdered my child!" A voice from the crowd, one of those people who had the courage to step forward when the sea of bystanders would not, accused, and the room spun. The Weaselton's smugness began to flake, revealing something raw beneath, the brittle panic of people who suddenly saw the scaffolding that had supported them dissolve. Isabella did not stride to the center of the room to flourish her victory. She did not need to perform vindication. Her son's face, which she could imagine like a sun behind clouds, was the only audience she truly cared to please. Instead, she stood still and watched the collapse of their pantomime. "Isabella Vaughn is her mother," someone declared, Vivian Hartley's own words, whispered into a microphone and then amplified until the ceiling shook. The moment the name, Vivian Hartley, landed, the room fractured down lines of honor and obligation. This was not merely celebrity. This was an empire signature, a name that could cause entire accounts to tilt and hedge funds to retrench. "What? You mean the daughter who died 20 years ago?" A man sputtered, incredulous. "Yes, the elderly woman who had been dismissed, whose life the Weaseltons had attempted to bury, said in a voice that trembled but did not break. "She is my daughter. She is the one they called Vivian Hartley." The revelation detonated. Questions tumbled like dominoes. Where was she? Why wasn't she known? Who allowed such a monstrous deception to stand? People who had applauded and flirted with the Weaseltons moments before now recoiled, checking their phones, sharing articles with eyes that looked suddenly less amused and more culpable. Ava's face, which had always been a practiced mask, now betrayed a palimpsest of fear. Michael's teeth showed too much when he smiled. Nathan's posture went rigid. They had built, from vanity and calculation, a facade that assumed the world would believe the well-scripted lie. The world had other plans. "You said she died," someone kept repeating, as if repetition could restore the illusion. "You told us." You looked right into her eyes and still chose to leave her alone in the freezing rain for that woman's baby. A voice from the crowd accused, the words landing with the force of an indictment. "Now the baby you abandoned in the rain has become someone you can't even reach." If Isabella had been looking for a Pyrrhic victory, she might have found it there, the public unspooling of a secret that could not be rewoven. But she refused to gloat. Love, she had learned, operates differently from revenge. It was quieter, more relentless, like the small hand she imagined wrapping around her finger at night. She let the crowd rage and the cameras clamor. She held fast to that image like a lighthouse against a storm. The Weaseltons scrambled. PR teams waved press releases like talismans. Lawyers counseled belated dignity. The ballroom's murmur turned into a chorus of dismay and speculation. Contracts were deferred, endorsements withdrawn. Social media influencers denounced partnerships. Their balance sheets slid beneath their feet like a dream becoming a nightmare. A hush fell when Vivian Hartley herself finally stepped into the light, cutting through the din like a blade of winter sun. She was not the visage the tabloids had conjured. No caricature, no billboard-friendly smile. She was a woman with a lineage, a presence that did not require display. Her eyes found Isabella's and held them, and in that exchange, simple, unadorned, something in the air recalibrated. The room, like a held breath, seemed to exhale. "My daughter," Vivian said, and the tenderness in her voice made a few men's jaws clench. "This woman is my mother." A ripple of disbelief ticked the tablecloths and the chandeliers. The Weaseltons' world, built on the premise that propriety could be bartered, cracked under the weight of that sentence. In an era where image and capital are the twin gods of society, to have both publicly dissented is to invite a fall of Shakespearean proportion. "You don't get to make me small," Isabella said later, in a quieter corner while the press did its circling dance. She allowed herself to be human in a way she had not permitted when she wore power like armor. "You thought you could exchange a life like a thing. You thought you could bury truth beneath investments and gala appearances. But truth will always find a way back." The Weaseltons were very good at mobilizing pity at first, crafting narratives of being wronged and bewildered. They could point at their own losses and cry revenge. But the video, the midwife's note, the temp worker's statement, the material, solid things that are the scaffolding of guilt, would not be touched by tears. By the time the night folded itself into memory, the world had shifted. News cycles pivoted, shareholders demanded explanations, and patrons at the banquet who had been laughing at someone's misfortune now shuttled away with murmured regrets. The Weaseltons, who had planned a night of capital and coronation, found instead a dizzying, public dismantling, a spectacle gone wrong for them and searingly right for justice. Isabella walked out into the winter night with a different gait than when she had arrived. The city buzzed. The cold air worked into her lungs like truth. She did not expect forgiveness. She only wanted to be allowed to keep the small person who had returned to her, the child who would one day ask questions she would answer honestly, without the gloss of money or the thin tissue of reputation. "People believed your lies because they wanted to," she told herself. "They accepted your versions because it was easier. But easier is not always kinder, and kindness is what matters now." In the weeks that followed, the Weaseltons' name would curl in print to stain. Lawsuits would clatter like falling silverware. Apologies would be uttered with the metallic taste of necessity rather than remorse. Partnerships dissolved. Wealth retreated. And Isabella, she would not return to the marble halls with the same hunger for conquest she once had. She had found something that night that no ballroom could contain, a name reclaimed, a child whose first memories might one day be of lullabies, not ledger books. The banquet had been set as a stage for their triumph. It had become instead a crucible where their hypocrisies were purged in the light. The rich and the powerful can sometimes command the narrative. In that room, for a fleeting, glorious instant, the narrative turned on them. As the night closed, a passerby captured a final image in his phone. Isabella standing near the curb, her silhouette against the luminous hotel sign. Hair loose, coat unbuttoned, the smallest hint of a smile playing at the corner of her mouth. She held nothing but the knowledge that she had endured, and in enduring, reclaimed not only her son but a piece of herself that money had never bought. The story would be written and rewritten, the feeds would opine, the pundits would pontificate, but the essential quiet inside Isabella was simple and absolute. She had lost and she had found. She had been denuded of titles and restored to what mattered. In the morning, the headlines would roar. Tonight, she walked into a city that had been made new by a small, stubborn truth. You cannot buy motherhood, and you cannot sell conscience. All right, here's the next standalone tragic love betrayal mini-story for your series. The heiress who chose love over blood. Elena Moretti was born into a family where loyalty wasn't just expected, it was demanded. Her father, Don Moretti, ruled the underworld with an iron fist, and every alliance, every marriage, was a transaction for power. But Elena's heart betrayed her heritage. She fell for Luca, a quiet artist who painted murals in forgotten alleyways, a man who had nothing to offer but his devotion. For the first time in her life, she felt free, seen not as an heiress, but as a woman. When her father discovered their affair, the punishment was swift. Luca disappeared one night, leaving behind only a blood-stained scarf. Don Moretti told her coldly, "This is the cost of disobedience." Years later, on the eve of her arranged marriage to a rival mobster's son, Elena entered the cathedral in a gown heavy with pearls and grief. As the vows began, a familiar figure appeared at the back of the church. Luca! Alive, scarred but alive. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Guns were drawn. The priest froze mid-sentence. And Elena, she didn't hesitate. She tore off her veil, ran toward him, and in front of family, allies, and enemies alike, chose love over blood. The bullets that followed were deafening. When the smoke cleared, the pews were shattered, the aisles soaked in crimson. Elena and Luca lay entwined on the marble floor, hands clasped, hearts stilled. For the Moretti family, it was betrayal. For the world, it was scandal. But for Elena and Luca, it was freedom. They died not as heiress and pauper, but as two souls who chose each other until the very end. The bride's last vow. On the day of her wedding, Marissa Langston looked every inch the perfect bride. Silk gown, diamond tiara, a smile that convinced the world she was marrying for love. But only she knew the truth. Her groom, Adrian Cross, wasn't the man she wanted. He was the man who destroyed her. Months earlier, Marissa had been engaged to Daniel, her college sweetheart. They planned a simple life, full of laughter and little dreams. But Adrian, wealthy, ruthless, untouchable, wanted her for himself. When she refused, he crushed Daniel's career, ruined his family, and left him broken. Daniel's final letter to her ended with only 3 words: "Don't forgive him." Days later, he was gone. Now, standing at the altar, Marissa's hands trembled, not with fear, but with resolve. The priest asked her to speak her vows. She looked into Adrian's eyes, those cold, greedy eyes, and whispered, "I vow to love you until death do us part." The crowd sighed at the romance. Adrian smirked, believing he had won. But as the champagne flowed and the music swelled at the reception, Marissa slipped something into his glass. Not poison, not something that would kill quickly. No, she wanted him to feel everything. By midnight, Adrian collapsed, writhing as guests screamed. Marissa stood over him, her gown stained with spilled wine, her eyes shining with tears. "You took the man I loved," she said softly. "Now you'll understand what it means to lose everything." When the police came, she didn't resist. She lifted her wrists, chains heavier than diamonds, and smiled through her tears. For Marissa, freedom wasn't walking away. Freedom was knowing justice had been served by her own hand. The bride never made it to her honeymoon, but she kept her last vow. The room had been a polished stage for cruelty all night. Chandeliers throwing light like interrogation lamps, guests arranged like judges, and a chorus of knives disguised as compliments. Isabella moved through it like a woman wrapped in memories. Every laugh sounded like an accusation. The Weaselton's entourage prowled at her heels, venom neat in their smiles, and the air tasted of expensive perfume, and small mercies turned rancid. She had barely set foot into the restaurant when the first spear found its mark. Voices at a nearby table, shingled with sneer, doing what the privileged do best. Reduce a person to costume and narrative. You paid her to pretend. You blow all your money on that stunt, and now you can't even afford a proper outfit. Wow. The fact that people like you exist is genuinely tragic. Think whatever you want. They expected her to flee. They expected her to crumple in a corner and make room for their spectacle. Instead, Isabella kept her shoulders even, her face a quiet study of restraint. Her ex-husband's laughter, thin, practiced, echoed somewhere behind them, the sound of a man who believed social cruelty was a useful tool. I can't believe I once married someone as pathetic and stupid as you. Hey, excuse me. This woman is not up to the dress code. This is an expensive, exclusive place. You're going to let a woman dressed like this go into your restaurant? This place used to be good. You can't even afford an airman. A woman dressed like this go into your restaurant? This place used to be good. You can't even afford an Hermes? Honestly, if this is your clientele, then we won't be coming back, because this place obviously has no class. They spat judgments as if they were currency. A host, more trained in bearing than empathy, tried to mediate to preserve the evening. But cruelty was a contagion, and it spread like laughter through the room. Most of our guests do have designer bags, jewelry worth 6 figures. I'm afraid that your dress, this dress is a private, custom-made piece by Enzo Moretti. Oh, you mean the Enzo Moretti? The Italian couture. The one that the British royal family wears. Some of his custom gowns cost over 100 grand. There's no way you can afford that. Every piece he makes is one of a kind. If you had any taste at all, you would have recognized it immediately. But I suppose that's asking too much from people like you. They thought recognition would shame her. They were wrong. She let the words land and fold around her like rain on old stone. Please, don't make me laugh. Everything you're wearing wouldn't even fetch $100. I have tissues more expensive. Oh, and this? You see this? This is an anniversary gift Nathan got me. Yeah, your ex-husband gave me this. And you? What? He gave you dead flowers from the trash. That's the kind of gifts he'd give you at twice. Only a beautiful, adored woman like Ava deserves a necklace like that. That's why she belongs here, draped in diamonds. And you're just a pathetic divorcee. Why don't you go out to the alley and eat your dinner out of the trash where you belong? The group's laughter was a pack of dull instruments. They wielded shame with the amateur's bluntness. It stung but did not break her. Instead, Isabella let the noise reveal its own emptiness. Yeah, everything you have came from me. The fact that you're standing here bragging like some self-made man is honestly hilarious. And that jewelry is not even worth 1/10 the value of this dress, let alone my entire collection. So really, Ava, you're just embarrassing yourself. You little bitch. Enough. Get her out of here. Yeah. If you don't believe me, check Enzo Moretti's official site. Fine, I will. It's identical. Oh, please. It's a simple design. It's probably just a knockoff. Yeah, exactly. She probably bought it secondhand or in the clearance section. Every Enzo Moretti piece has a signature embroidered. It's real. Relax. It's just a dress. Who knows? Maybe she sold everything just to rent it for a night. Or like I said, it's a knockoff. They had rehearsed humiliation to a fine art. But what they hadn't counted on was a different kind of theater arriving at their table. The arrival of witnesses who saw through the noise. Servers shifted, a maitre d' blinked, and somewhere, a man who had watched Isabella with a kind of quiet sympathy reached for his wallet. Small acts of decency tended to multiply. Exactly. Even if it was real, it's definitely not more expensive than this. Of course it is. This piece was handmade by Enzo Moretti himself. There's only one in the world. Even if you sold your entire jewelry collection, you still wouldn't be able to afford it. Their certainty crumbled a little, irritated like plaster when the paint beneath is poor. It was the first fissure. Then the scene accelerated into the absurd, an exchange of ownership and accusation that made a carnival of the room. Oh my gosh, just stop bragging about it. Stop. I really don't have time to listen to people like you. What now? Bring over the entire collection. You buy any of this? What a performance. Let me guess, another actor? Need a few bucks for props? Want us to toss you some spare change along with your $100 alimony? Don't you know that this place employs trained professionals? They see you in that fake garbage, they'll toss you out faster than yesterday's leftovers. Stop humiliating yourself, and take it off before I do. You'll spend the rest of your life trying to pay it off. Let's see who can actually afford it. Tear it off. Let's see if you have the guts to walk in there in your underwear. Yeah, madam. Miss Vaughn has already reserved the VIP room. Kindly show some respect. Ava's voice had sharpened into performance, cruelty stylized for an audience that ate panic with their amuse-bouche. The room was a theater, and the Weaseltons attempted to direct every eye toward Isabella, as if she were the only story worth watching. Miss Vaughn, my sincere apologies. Welcome back. Your private suite awaits. When was she here? No, We're going in too. We have a guest only. It looks like I'm not the one who doesn't belong here. Those words were a small, bitter vindication. But the night was far from done. Social currency, cards, status, names, flittered across the table like confetti. Did you ever marry that woman? She has money. Well, not anymore. To new beginnings, to newborn freedom, and to leaving that terrible man. Thank you, Alaric. It really feels like a fresh start for the first time in a long while. I've always wondered. You're such a powerful man. You have so many women interested in you, so many advantages. Why did you wait so long for me? Was it for business? A strategic alliance through marriage? No, Isabella, it was none of those things. I've waited for you because I know the kind of woman you are. You're a good wife. You're a devoted mother. I've seen what you've given up for your family. Yet the man you married never saw your worth. He was blind to everything. If he wasn't, he wouldn't have let you go. It was hard, giving so much and getting so little in return. Hearing you say this, Alaric, it means more than I expected. Isabella, you deserve better. I hope you let yourself be happy. I hope you let me be the one that sees you, that truly sees you. I like that, Alaric. I like that very much. Who knows? Maybe this could be the beginning of something good. Shall we cheers to that? God again. Jesus, everywhere she goes. Sorry, ma'am. This card cannot be used here. Why not? Because our restaurant. Because this restaurant caters to a very exclusive clientele. If you don't have the right card, even a little bit of money won't help. Yeah. So even if you did sneak in, you still don't belong here. How incredibly not awkward. Tell you what, though. If you can't pay your bill, you can always jump in the back and do dishes. She'll be scrubbing plates for a lifetime. Let's face it, she's worthless. Just a discarded housewife with no husband, no money. The matador had arrived, the man whose silence was a kind of bodyguard for dignity. Alaric Whitmore's entrance shifted the room's gravity. Where the Weaseltons offered scorn, he offered a ledger of influence. For a moment their mocking blew, like wind against a cliff. Then the night became theater again, but with the stakes suddenly real. Well, if you had a shred of dignity, you wouldn't show your face here. Here, try this one. This is one of the highest level cards by some of the top banks. Only 10 people in the whole country have won. Each person who has won has absolute power. Can it be used here? Absolutely. In fact, as the owner of this card, you are our most honored guest tonight. Where the hell did you get this? It's mine, of course. Impossible. You gave all of your assets to our son. You couldn't afford something like this. Oh, I get it. She stole it, probably from us. Every time I think the three of you can't possibly get more shameless, you still manage to surprise me. We're just taking back what is ours. It's fair. Well, then by all means, read what's engraved on it. Now do you want to give it back? Or should I call security again? This card is custom made for each of the bank's most prestigious clients. Each one has the owner's name engraved on it. So yes, this card is mine. How does she have this card? I thought she gave all her assets to her son. I see. You've been hiding money from me all along. Where's the love? Where is the trust? I guess it turns out you really are just a lying, selfish bitch. Exactly. You gave your assets to our son, which means technically this card is ours too. Go on, keep going. They hurled every weapon they had. Accusation, shame, the brutal claim that money explained everything. The room leaned in to watch a woman being unmade. And then the world, ever hungry for spectacle, turned on a dime. I just wanted to thank you for such a wonderful husband and an amazing son and this beautiful card. You are too generous. Really? No, really. Don't worry. If you don't want to enjoy your luxury, I'll enjoy it. You're too generous. Really, no, really. Don't worry. If you don't want to enjoy your luxury, I'll enjoy it for you. Trash like them, you might be able to steal by playing the mistress, but some things are just not meant to enjoy. What is that supposed to mean? That card carries my identity, so only I can use it. But hey, feel free to try it. Just know you'll be arrested for fraud. You don't think I won't? That's destruction of property. You'll be paying for that. No, that's mine if I said it's mine, right? Yeah, so I'm not paying for anything. Dream on. What are you gonna do now, dumbass? Can't even pay your bill. Since you raised me, I'll make you an offer. If you get on your knees and beg, maybe I'll pay for lunch, Mom. Their cruelty reached for ritual. It was performative, obscene. And then, like a public execution interrupted by an unexpected mercy, the manager tried to restore order with a rehearsed apology. But the moment had passed. Other forces had already begun their work. Do you accept digital payments? That's ours too. Remember, you signed the contract. Why don't you just call up your man to come pay for you? Oh yeah, that's right. Your husband dumped you. You were just a broke, washed up, old hag that nobody wants. That's enough. Are you okay? Sure. Here's a paraphrase of the text. Sure, I'll take care of the bill. Do you see this? Who are you? Mr. Whitmore. I'll call the manager immediately. Alaric Whitmore, the CEO of Whitmore Group? It's a pleasure to meet you, sir. I have to ask, what's a distinguished gentleman like you doing with someone like her? From my experience, don't waste your time. She's just a faded housewife. That's where you're mistaken and, frankly, sad. Isabella is kind and caring. She has done everything for her family and has protected her child. She's a true gem for any man. A real man with taste, dignity, and integrity wouldn't pursue someone like her. She's a homewrecker with no morals. You're not a woman, you're a disgrace. How dare you say that? Don't. We can't afford to offend him. I apologize. And I plan to treat her well. Do you all have your bill to settle too? Fine, it's just lunch. Process that. Sorry, sir, this card has been declined. It's frozen. That's impossible. What? There's plenty of money in that account. Try it again. Use this one. This is embarrassing. I don't like this. Just try all of them. No. Give us I don't know. No, not this one. Oh my god. This card has been declined too. Oh my god. And this one as well. What is happening? Our company assets are frozen. Oh no, there's a huge public backlash. They're protesting. I don't know what's going on. I guess they found out I cheated on Isabella and that we deceived her into raising Michael. And now they're furious. The public is angry and our stock prices are plummeting. Oh god, now our accounts are frozen too. I can't breathe. I can't breathe. The bars weren't open. Damn it, Beauty won't open this door. It's fine. It's fine. Just to clarify, as the CEO of the Whitmore Group, I've blacklisted you. No one looking to partner with you would be my ally. Shall we leave? Of course. Mr. Whitmore. Please, it's fine. Okay. It's fine. It's fine. Just so you know, in a few days, the Hartley Group is having their public day. As long as we impress the real Vivian Hartley, we'll be back in the game. Yes. Give me my card back. Send us the bill. Let's go. Are you sure? Okay. You look amazing today. You always say the nicest things. I mean it. You look so much better now than when you were married to that jerk, playing the housewife. You're right. I never should have married your father. Then I wouldn't have had a daughter as wonderful as you. I don't see him as my dad. Just think about how he treated you. But it's okay. You're back now. You're ready to be the CEO of the Hartley Group. Come on, Mom. The bidding is about to commence, and you have the power to choose the fortunate winner of the billion-dollar contract. Let's celebrate our impending victory. That Hartley contract will be ours. propelling us to new heights and a promising future. Look at them, wealthy and influential. Soon, we will join their ranks. I can't wait for Isabella to feel regret. When she learns about our billion-dollar deal, she'll be consumed with envy, and it will all be thanks to you, my son. Even Vivian hardly couldn't resist the charm of old Wessel. She personally wrote the invitation. Thank you for being such an incredible son. Unlike that useless woman who was only good for cooking, cleaning, and providing us with spending money. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Miss Vivian Hartley and her mother. That seat must belong to Hartley's mother. Just look at the opulence. Don't be envious. Tomorrow, when Vivian chooses us, that seat will be hers. In God's name, they practiced their victory as if speaking it aloud could bring it to fruition. They laughed and envisioned their rise to power. Then, the night, which had been precariously balanced between absurdity and disaster, tipped over. No, I've said it before and I'll say it again. I was wrong. I regret everything. Please forgive me and let's reconcile. It's too late. I gave you numerous chances, but you never valued them. You're not my son, but I raised you for 20 years. And what did you do? Betray me the moment I entrusted you with my fortune. I'm sorry, Mom. I was wrong. You've worked tirelessly to raise me, pouring your heart and soul into it. I saw it all, but I didn't appreciate it. I truly made a mistake. Please forgive me. I trusted you, promoted you, treated you like my apprentice. And how did you repay me? By having an affair with my husband and shattering my family. I'm so sorry. Please forgive me, Mrs. Vaughn. And you. I took care of you and this family for over 20 years. I washed your clothes, cooked for you, raised our children, and you cheated, attempted to harm our biological daughter, and stole my property. You brought this upon yourself. Nobody move. Nobody move. Wait. Isabella, come here. Why are you just standing there? Get over here. Dad, stop. Come here. Dad, stop. You've crossed the line. We have no choice. This guy has backed us into a corner. If we don't act, we're finished. Once we have their money, we can leave the country. They won't be able to touch us. Nathan, let Vivian go. I promise I'll find a way out for you. But if you harm her, I swear I'll make you pay with your life. Do you think I would trust you? I hold all the cards now. I can do whatever I want. And I say, get down on your knees and make sure this little brat hands over all her money. Mom, don't do that. I won't give them a dime. Everything goes to my mom. Really? Nathan. Dad, don't. Just let her go. I'm scared. Nathan, let her go. Okay. Isabella will keep her word, right? Right. I have my jewelry. We can sell my jewelry, and the three of us can live off that, right? Who cares about your pathetic money? If it weren't for you, you gold-digging woman, we wouldn't even be in this situation. You think your looks can replace Isabella, and that you should be in my bed. Now, Michael, you're still my son. If you have any manhood in you, you'll do what I say, and we can get out of here. She raised me, and don't forget, you betrayed her too. She'll never forgive you. Do what I say. Grab a knife, and hold her. Don't come any closer. Isabella, if you take another step, I'll cut her face. Fine. I won't move. Everyone knows I keep my promises. If I say I'll let you go, I mean it. I won't complicate your life. But even if you get the money, there's no escape. You'll just be digging your own grave. Enough with your empty threats. Give us the money, or I'll cut her face and then slit her throat. Fine. I'll do it. Mom, don't. Vivian, trust me. I'll get the money. If you had done that sooner, none of this would have happened. I'll get you the money. You've already tried to kill our daughter once, and now you want to do it again? No. I'll have my son do it. Now hold her. I'm going to transfer the money. You foolish woman. You thought you could defeat me? I'm meant for greatness. Now transfer the money for our precious daughter. Pay the ultimate price. Hurry up. Son, we're rich. We'll never have to worry about money again. And you fool, will spend the rest of your miserable life broken alone. But, Dad, she's still my mom. Vivian, now! You'll spend the rest of your life in prison. Go. From now on, I no longer have a son. Mom, wait. Allie, our flight to the Maldives is about to board. Goodbye. The noise faded into shocked silence. Amid the chaos of accusations, one undeniable truth emerged. A family falling apart in public was a spectacle that couldn't be dignified. People in the room shifted uncomfortably, some reaching for their phones, others for their morals. Isabella had heard enough. She had shown the world proof before. She knew how evidence could change the narrative. Now, the truth was louder than their lies, and the crowd, always eager for a story, began to focus on something she could use. Not for revenge or spectacle, but for reclamation. She stepped forward, each movement intentional, every breath a calculation of consequences. The banquet's extravagance suddenly felt hollow, its lights less blinding. She wouldn't beg. She wouldn't be a mere footnote in someone else's tale. The room, once a temple of privilege, surrounded her, and she concluded this scene in the only way that mattered, by standing firm, with the truth in her grasp and the courage to watch them fall. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this situation, so please share your opinions in the comments. Also, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications to stay updated on this story.